My husband and my sister betrayed me, but the real villain was someone I never suspected. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to post my personal life online, but I don't know what else to do. I feel like I'm losing my mind, like my whole life has been a lie. And the worst part? I still don't have solid proof. But my gut is screaming at me that something is very, very wrong. I guess I should start at the beginning. I, a 30-year-old female, have been married to Mark, a 32-year-old male, for 6 years. It was not a whirlwind romance, but it was steady and reliable, the kind of relationship people called a good marriage. We rarely fought, we agreed on big life decisions, and I truly believed we were happy. My sister, Emily, who is 27 years old, has always been the closest family I have. When our father passed away, I took care of her like a second parent. I helped her through college, let her stay at our house whenever she needed, and even covered some of her expenses when she was struggling. She's always been fun, flirty, the kind of person people naturally gravitate toward, but I never had a reason to think she'd cross a line. Until now. It didn't happen overnight. Mark didn't start coming home late or hiding his phone like some bad cliché. If anything, he was more attentive than usual. He started bringing me flowers randomly. He'd kiss my forehead and tell me he loved me out of nowhere. When we were intimate, it felt different. Almost like he was trying too hard to feel something. I should have been happy. But instead, I felt uneasy, like there was something happening just out of my line of sight. Then Emily started acting differently too. She stopped sharing details about her dating life, which was strange, because we used to tell each other everything. When she was over, she'd avoid being alone with me. And then there were the small things, like her borrowing my perfume, or a jacket, but only when she knew Mark would be around. I told myself I was being paranoid. I tried to push it away, until something happened that I couldn't ignore. It was a Sunday morning. Emily had stayed over at our place the night before, saying she was too tired to drive home after dinner. Nothing unusual about that. She left early, saying she had errands to run. A few hours later, I was doing laundry when I pulled a sweater out of the basket. It was mine. But I had left this sweater at Emily's apartment a few weeks ago. I remember because I had told her to keep it until I visited again. So how the hell did it end up here? I picked it up, confused, and then I smelled it. Mark's cologne. My stomach dropped so fast I felt like I was falling. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she had borrowed it before and it just happened to smell like him. But I had washed it before leaving it at her place. There was no reason at all, for it to smell like my husband. And then I remembered something else. The night before, after we had all finished dinner, I had gone upstairs to grab extra pillows for Emily. I had only been gone a few minutes. When I came back down, the room went silent. They weren't sitting close together, they weren't whispering, but the air had changed. Thick, heavy, like I had just interrupted something I wasn't supposed to see. I ignored it then. I wasn't ignoring it now. I didn't say anything to Mark right away. I needed more. A part of me was desperate to be wrong, so I decided to watch them. Not in an obvious way, just observe. And once I started looking, I couldn't unsee it. When we were all together, they would actively avoid sitting next to each other, but their bodies were angled toward each other. When I talked, Mark would respond, but his eyes would flicker to Emily, just for a fraction of a second. Emily started wearing my perfume. And the worst part? One night, as Mark hugged me from behind, he inhaled deeply, and for a moment, I could have sworn he looked disappointed, like I didn't smell the way he expected me to. What now? I don't want to be one of those people, the ones who accuse their husband and sister of something so horrific without proof. But I can't shake this feeling. I don't know what to do. I don't know if I should confront them now, or wait until I have something concrete. All I know is that if what I suspect is true, I don't know how I'll ever recover from it. I wanted to be wrong. I kept telling myself that I was overthinking, that the way Mark and Emily acted around each other was just in my head, that I was being paranoid, insecure, crazy. But deep down, I already knew the truth. And when it finally hit me in the face, it was so much worse than I ever could have imagined. After finding my sweater smelling like Mark's cologne, I started paying closer attention. I told myself it was just for peace of mind, but I think I already knew what I would find. And once I started watching them, The pattern became obvious. Mark's hands always fidgeted when Emily was in the room. A nervous tick, as if he was stopping himself from doing something. Emily laughed at his jokes too quickly, in a way that was forced. Guilty. The way they avoided touching each other, but too deliberately. Like it took effort to maintain the space between them. Then came the night everything fell apart. Mark told me he was going to sleep early because he had a headache. Emily had stopped by earlier to pick up a jacket she had left at our house. I was downstairs, cleaning up, when I heard something from upstairs. It was muffled, a quiet thud, then a giggle. My heart stopped. I turned off the kitchen sink and listened harder. Another sound, something rustling against the sheets. My chest tightened, my vision blurred. I felt like I was suddenly underwater. No. I took a deep breath and walked upstairs toward our bedroom. The hallway was dark. The only light came from the small gap under the bedroom door. Mark was supposed to be sleeping, alone, but as I got closer, I heard it clearly. Emily's voice, whispering. Then Mark's, low, amused, intimate. I could not breathe. My hand was shaking as I reached for the door handle. I pushed it open, and there they were. Mark was sitting on the edge of the bed, his shirt unbuttoned. Emily was between his legs, her hands on his shoulders. The moment they saw me, they froze. Time seemed to stop. For a second, no one moved. No one spoke. Mark's face turned pale. Emily yanked her hands away like she had been burned, but it was too late. I had already seen everything. Something inside me snapped. I had imagined a million ways this could happen. I thought I would scream, throw things, break down sobbing, but I did none of those things. Instead, I laughed. A hollow, bitter, broken laugh that made both of them flinch. So, this is what you have been doing behind my back. Mark stood up quickly, his voice suddenly panicked. Wait, this is not what it looks like. Emily looked down at the floor, her hands trembling. Not what it looks like, I repeated. Really? So what exactly am I looking at? Mark opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He had no excuse. Emily finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I did not mean for it to happen. I turned to her so fast she took a step back. You did not mean for it to happen? My voice was eerily calm. So what was your plan here, Emily? To just keep sneaking around forever? She blinked rapidly, tears welling in her eyes. I do not know. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay steady. How long? I asked. Neither of them answered. I clenched my jaw. How long? Mark sighed, rubbing his face like he was annoyed by the question. Almost a year, he muttered. A whole year. Emily snapped her head up, suddenly defensive. You and Mark were not happy anymore, she blurted out. You have to admit that. I stared at her, my mind reeling. You are actually blaming me for this? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. She crossed her arms, her voice shaking. I did not steal him from you. You lost him. Her voice broke. I just picked up what you let go. For a moment I felt nothing, then a burning, all-consuming rage filled my chest. I took a slow step forward. Emily flinched. You are standing in my bedroom, I whispered, touching my husband, in my house, and you have the audacity to tell me this is my fault? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Mark stayed silent. Because what could he say? There was nothing left. I walked out that night. But before I left, I turned to Mark one last time. You deserve each other, I said. And I hope one day you realize just how much you have destroyed. Then I walked past Emily. She was crying now, reaching for me. Please, she whispered. Do not hate me. I did not even look at her. I picked up my keys, grabbed my bag, and walked out the front door. But just when I thought it could not get worse, I stayed at a hotel that night. My phone was flooded with missed calls from both of them. I turned it off. The next morning, I had every intention of going straight to a lawyer. But then Emily texted me something that changed everything. You think I am the bad one? You should ask Mom why she pushed you into this marriage in the first place. I stared at my screen, my hands shaking. What the hell did that mean? I thought I had lost my husband and my sister. But now, it seemed like I was about to lose my entire family. I thought nothing could hurt more than walking in on my husband and my sister. I was wrong. Because what I discovered next changed everything I thought I knew. Not just about my marriage, but about my entire life. I spent the night at a hotel. I barely slept. My body felt like it was on autopilot, my brain refusing to process what had just happened. By morning, my plan was simple. Get a lawyer, File for divorce? Cut them both off. But then Emily texted me. You think I'm the bad one? You should ask Mom why she pushed you into this marriage in the first place. I sat up in bed, rereading those words over and over. What the hell did she mean? I drove straight to my mother's house. She opened the door, looking too calm, like she had been expecting me. I assume you know, she said, stepping aside to let me in. I did not even sit down. I just crossed my arms and stared at her. You already knew. My voice was steady, but inside, I was crumbling. She did not deny it. She just sighed, like I had just asked her to explain something boring. I clenched my fists. Emily said you had something to do with this. What does that mean? Mom finally looked at me, and for the first time I noticed something in her eyes that made my stomach drop. She was not surprised. She was not guilty. She was annoyed. She sat down, folding her hands in her lap, and said the words that would destroy everything I thought I knew. Mark was never supposed to be yours. The room spun around me. What? My voice barely came out. She let out a slow breath. Emily and Mark were together first. I could barely breathe as my mother continued. Emily and Mark dated years ago. He was her first love. She cheated on him. He broke up with her. Then I met Mark. I stared at her, my pulse thudding in my ears. You knew? I whispered. The whole time? She nodded. Of course. My legs shook. I gripped the back of a chair to steady myself. So why the hell did you push me toward him? I demanded. Mom just tilted her head. Because, sweetheart, she said simply, Emily was never responsible enough to be a wife. But you were perfect. I felt sick, she continued, completely unbothered. When Mark started seeing you, I encouraged it. I told him you were the better choice. You were stable, loyal, you would never make a mess of things like Emily did. I covered my mouth. She set me up. My own mother manipulated my marriage from the very beginning. I could not speak, my throat was closing, but my mother just shrugged. And it worked, didn't it? You got married, you had a good life. I laughed, a bitter, broken sound. A good life? You think this was a good life? She raised an eyebrow. You were happy, were you not? I blinked at her. I did not recognize this woman sitting in front of me. She saw my entire marriage as a transaction. She did not care about my happiness. She did not care about my feelings. She just wanted Mark to stay in the family. I turned away, shaking my head. But then a thought hit me. A new, horrible realization. If you knew, I whispered, then you knew what Emily was doing too. I turned back to my mother, my heart slamming against my ribs. Her face remained unreadable. You knew, I said again, my voice shaking. You knew Emily was sleeping with my husband. She did not deny it. Instead, she exhaled deeply. She made her choice, and so did Mark. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. You let it happen, I whispered. She just looked at me. I suddenly understood. My mother saw Emily and Mark's affair as balance being restored. Mark was never supposed to be mine, and when he went back to Emily, she accepted it. To her, this was the way things were meant to be all along. I was done. I took a deep breath. My whole body was trembling. Then I did something I never thought I would do. I turned and walked to the door. Where are you going? Mom asked. I looked at her one last time. Away from you, I said. Forever. Her face finally changed. I think that was the moment she realized she had lost me. But I did not care anymore. I did not cry. I did not scream. I walked away from all of them, and I never looked back. But the best part, they destroyed themselves without me. Mark never truly loved Emily. She was just an affair, a fantasy. When the excitement wore off, he got bored. Emily found out Mark was cheating on her too. Mom, she lost both of us. I did not need revenge. They ruined themselves. It took time, it took therapy, it took everything in me to rebuild myself. But I did. I moved to a new city. I started fresh. I found someone who actually deserved me. And Mark, Emily, Mom, they do not exist to me anymore. One day, Emily texted me, "Do you hate me?" I stared at the message for a long time. Then I deleted it. No response, no closure. She did not deserve it. Final words to them? You tried to break me. You failed. You destroyed yourselves instead. And I do not even need to watch you burn.